one. I don't think there was any real big losers.
I think Sony overall had probably the best one. I think the biggest news is probably Microsoft grabbing Final Fantasy 13. That's been like the only time during the show I get like that goosebump, I'm seeing news happen type of feeling from the press conferences.
I didn't think they were very strong, all three of them, but I would say probably Microsoft.
I think that it'd have to be Microsoft. They were the only company with a big bomb to drop.
I think everybody surrendered this year.
Sony.
Definitely Microsoft. I think their stuff was kind of nonstop, so.
Oh, I guess Microsoft did because they had Final Fantasy 13 and everything else felt kind of flat.
I think Microsoft because they came game after game after game and it just kind of went on, whereas, you know, Nintendo does their old philosophy lesson and different things. It was a good show, but, you know, they didn't announce a lot of games like Microsoft did. You know, Sony drug on forever. They announced God of War, we knew that, you know, so nothing too surprising out of it.
Microsoft.
I would have to say Sony. They had the highest production value. You know, they didn't jerk their numbers off in front of everybody. They actually did a really creative Little Big Planet business model demonstration, and they had great games to show. God of War 3, and you know, right there, I'm sold.
Definitely Microsoft. I mean, well, first of all, it definitely wasn't Nintendo. I'm sure we can all agree about that. But unfortunately, that's the only one I actually went to. And from what I gathered about the other conferences, I think Microsoft came on top because, you know, maybe they didn't have the best of all E3 announcements to make, but they had something more substantial than the other two. So, yeah.
Wow, who won the press conference wars? I mean, Sony and Microsoft is what I'd say, but, you know, I mean, Nintendo was a little boring.
I thought they were all pretty uneventful, actually. It's hard to choose a winner. I mean, I didn't see the Microsoft one in person, so it's on paper, I would say Microsoft had the most new and interesting announcements, and they topped it off with that Final Fantasy announcement. So I think I'd say on paper Microsoft, but I'm not the best fair judge on that.
I think Sony's the winner just because of the fact that they had better food, but then beyond the fact that they also had more to talk about. I know it had to be difficult for them to defend themselves after the announcement that Final Fantasy was coming to the 360.
That would be Microsoft.
Oh, Microsoft, I'd say. If only because Nintendo was silly and worthless. Yeah, nothing great.
Probably going to have to give it to Microsoft for that spike of the Final Fantasy 13 news. I think it just surprised everybody.
Oh, well, I mean, I know who lost. I mean, in Nintendo, the reaction to Nintendo was just bad. But honestly, I'd say, in terms I'd say Pacific Announcements is what won, and Microsoft's Final Fantasy 13 just theft, I'd say, is, you know, truly king for that one. That's the one, I'd say, in my estimates.
Oh, that's easy. That's Sony, definitely.
Maybe Microsoft, because they had the big shocker, that, you know, the big bombshell, and nobody else really seemed to have that. He doesn't want me to move around when I talk. Yeah.
Microsoft. It pains me to say it, but Microsoft did so much better than the other two console manufacturers that it's barely even worth mentioning. Yeah, Nintendo was really bad, especially considering that they're the market leader right now in terms of consoles. You really expect them to kind of be cocky and strut their stuff. They're more condescending and kind of than anything else. And it was really disappointing because they promised their hardcore audience that they'd be satisfied coming out of E3. And I don't think I've met anybody who's a hardcore Nintendo fan who's been satisfied with what they announced.
I'm going to say Microsoft. I think that, like, Sony had a decent showing, but it felt a little generic with MAG and stuff. And then Nintendo was just completely underwhelming.
You know, at first I thought Sony won because of the lineup. And I feel like each company kind of won individually. You know, I think Microsoft did really well with Gears of War 2 and Fallout 3, and Sony did well with Resistance. And Nintendo, you know, I think the hardcore gamers are disappointed because Wii Music is not what they expected. But you have to look at it from Nintendo's point of view. They want to move Wiis. They want to sell a lot of systems. And I think Wii Music is more poised to do that than, let's say, a Kid Icarus or a Punch-Out.